so we're not going to be able to vote on our motions. Thank you. Everybody's just happy to be back, right? Yeah. Now they get quiet. So thank you for being here. We don't have a quorum, so we're not going to be able to take any votes. Should we get a quorum before our meeting's over, we'll go back and take up these motions. In the meantime, it is our honor to have the Commissioner of the Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation with us today, and if he's available, I'd call him up to the podium. Mr. Marshall, thank you for being here. If you would introduce yourself to the audience and the millions of people listening, thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm William Marshall. I'm the Commissioner for the Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation.
You have a presentation for us today?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to put a couple of things out there for your all's interest. We currently are still dealing with vacancy rates within our staff. Right now we're at 1,022 division-wide. That puts us at 27%, and that 729 of those are corrections officers, which is at about 32%. We have 8 facilities that currently have 40% vacancies or more. So obviously we have some that's dealing in the 60s and 70s, but we have at least 8 that are dealing with 40% staffing vacancies or more. We have over 300 National Guard that are assisting in our facilities each and every day, along with NRP. They're doing a wonderful job for us. Not sure what we would actually do without them right now, sir. They're doing a wonderful job. We really appreciate their professionalism and their assistance. We continue to have maintenance needs. We appreciate the money that we did receive for the maintenance issues. We're going to put all the funds that we received to good use, of course. We've already got a number of bids out and money encumbered for a number of projects, larger projects for our facilities to make sure that we maintain the safety for those facilities. We welcome the possibility of a special session to hopefully address some of the pay needs for the division. That would be welcomed for us. And we are also working on a number of initiatives that we believe that can assist in bringing some of these officers to the table and getting them into our facilities. We have worked very closely with DOP and will continue to do so in order to kind of change the process in which when someone gets on the site to apply for a job, they were running into a little bit of a roadblock where they would come in to the test that they must take on the website, and some of them they were sort of afraid of that test. They didn't want to go through with the complete process. So now we're going to be capturing those applicants, and we'll be able to make contact with them and talk to them about the test, not to be fearful of that test, so we can try to get these individuals hired and brought into the facilities. We had over 100 of those individuals that had logged on, had filled out most of the application process, but didn't continue with the test. So hopefully that'll help as well. We've worked with a number of different agencies, along with the Department of Commerce, to rebrand ourselves, sort of say, to improve the website, improve the ways that we recruit. Improve the ways that we reach individuals on social media, due to the fact that the younger workforce is very social media driven, as I'm sure you're aware. We need to be able to bring these individuals, get their attention, bring them in, and hopefully they'll come in and will want to work for us. We've changed the way we've done our academy, starting immediately. We were doing a pre-service 6 weeks academy. That was a strain on a lot of individuals to be away for 6 weeks from their families, especially, you get someone under, 30s, 40s, whatever, that might have families and children to consider, single parents and so forth. So we've changed that process, and we've got them working at the facility for 2 weeks, shadowing an individual, getting the basic training there, and then take some online courses, and then before they would finish up, they would go to the academy for days here and there, maybe even a week, and hopefully that'll attract more individuals to say that they're not forced to be away for so long, and they can work at the facility and learn their job there. Right now, our population in the prisons and jails is just over 10,000. That's probably as low as it's been in a while. We're about 300 and some overpopulation for the totality of all of our jails, and about 200 of those are at North Central Regional Jail. Sir, we recently spoke to some individuals who will try to get some of those individuals from different counties moved up to Northern, moved up to different places to try to help that and alleviate that. We're meeting with the attorneys and prosecutors and judges and so forth, make sure that everybody's on board with that. But really, that right now, our North Central is about is probably the one that's what obviously is the one that's the heaviest right now as far as inmate population. Our juvenile centers right now are up to 325, and that's a high number, but it's not all that unusual during school time. It seems like that there's more kids, they'll get in trouble in school, and therefore they'll get reported and put through the courts more often. So we're working with all the counties to make sure that we put them through the proper process. We've got 54 kids at the Rubenstein Center right now, which is a great number. We were hovering at 20 or below for the longest time coming off the pandemic. And that's a fantastic program where they can learn life skills and have a lot of certifications and so forth whenever they leave that program, that they can make something of themselves. Right now, our youth reporting centers, we've just added what will be our 20th youth reporting center in Morgantown, West Virginia. It was really needed up there. It has been for a long time. We service 406 youth at our youth reporting centers around the state. Those essentially are alternative schoolings where they've they've committed a crime or done something that does not allow them to participate in regular schooling, public schooling. So we offer that so they don't get off track on their education, so they can still earn their diploma and go to college or get into some sort of a trade school. We also have 76 kids in our aftercare program. Aftercare is essentially equivalent to adult probation. So whenever they're released, we want to make sure they're not released and just let go out on the street. We have programming and make sure they have proper housing and proper programming and even job placement, things that we can do for them. We help them get driver's license and a lot of different things. So we have 76 kids in that program. So we're doing a number of different, back up to the staffing issue real quick. My executive officer, Brad Douglas, has been working really diligently with our recruiting team. They're really making a lot of really good inroads and coming up with some fresh ideas. I've been receiving a weekly report on how many individuals that those recruiters have touched base with, and who they're reaching out to, and seeing what kind of response we're getting for those. And it looks like to me that the aggressiveness has really paid off. So that's really all I have today, sir, unless you all have any questions.
Questions of the commissioner? Yes, sir, the senator from Monroe.
As far as juvenile and adults, the policies and procedures they are the same for juveniles and adults currently.
Well, there's a lot of crossover policies, but there's also a number of policies that stayed in place for the juveniles because they are so much different than the adult facilities.
Are there currently, since we've merged this, are there services that we offered in the past that we're not offering now?
To the juveniles?
To the juveniles, yeah.
No, sir. Actually, we've actually enhanced and improved a number of the programmings. We've established substance abuse programmings for the youth in 3 of our facilities. We've started a transitional living program at our Rubenstein Center that we didn't have before. But no, sir, there's been no programs compromised for the juveniles based upon the consolidation.
Next question, I just made some notes here, things I wanted to ask you about,
Sure.
is on the food side.
Yes, sir.
So are we feeding the the juveniles, and I understand some of these are grade school, middle school age kids. Are we feeding them the same thing we're feeding the adults?
Well, sir, we have the child nutrition guidelines, of course, and we do have the same vendor, but we have worked with that vendor in order to make sure that we have a different menu for the juveniles and make sure that we meet those standards for them. We have dealt with a number of different requests and different problems that we took on once we entered into our new contract. But since then, I think things have greatly improved. We're very aggressive when something is to come up, whether they end up with bad lettuce or bad bread or whatever. We make sure that's corrected immediately. And so we've seen where the problems have been. So we're making sure that the kids are fed properly and fed what they deserve to get. We don't want any of them to not have what they need.
So do you think of those meals as being kid friendly?
Well, kid friendly. I guess that'd be subjective, but
Yeah.
they get a menu that's very much like what a public school lunch would be. So they try to stay within the guidelines of the child nutrition. If we don't stay within those guidelines, there's a certain amount of reimbursements, a certain amount of things we can't do for the kids if we don't stay in those guidelines. But I believe right now it's as good as it's been since we started with our new contract.
Good. And as far as the food being hot or not, or is it being prepared at the facility, or is it off-site and being delivered?
All the juvenile food is currently being prepared at that facility. We've made a change to where all of their product is it's not delivered directly to necessarily the juvenile center. There's a couple of them that there are, but for example, all of the food would be delivered to, say, Western Regional Jail, but the crates and pallets for juvenile services is marked distinctly, and then the Robert Shell Center goes up to the top of the hill when it comes in, get their stuff and bring it down to be refrigerated and stored, and all the meals are being prepared at the juvenile centers.
Okay, thank you, sir. On the medical side of it, just dealing with kids, and I remember when I was there, your temper's a little hot, you tend to punch walls and do things like that. The ability to treat a juvenile, how quickly are we able to do that, say for an x-ray?
Well, we've and I appreciate you bringing that up, because we did have a couple of issues where we were kind of stuck between a doctor and a hospital and our new vendor. And so we've been very proactive in regards to that. And I've made sure that the facilities understand they don't necessarily have to wait for someone to order that. If we have someone at the facility, and keep in mind, we don't try to be doctors. We're not trying, we can't make diagnosis or so forth. But if it's pretty obvious a kid needs an x-ray or a kid has an injury that needs stitches or something, we'll make that decision and go ahead and be more proactive with it. When the new contract for the medical first took over, there were some miscommunications there, and we actually dealt with one last week where there were some miscommunications between our vendor and the doctor at a hospital, and we kind of got caught in the middle. So we're being more proactive. As you're aware, we hired Dr. Amjad to help us in those areas. She's very proactive. Everything that comes down, she gets a copy of it. She gets to work through it with us, and it's made it a lot more efficient.
I'm glad to hear that. What concerns me, you and I, we can wait a couple of days. We don't heal up very quick. Those kids on the other hand, their bones start to knit back a little faster, and
yes, sir.
If they're in the wrong position, that creates additional problems. And,
yes, sir. I'm a father of 5 kids myself, and I would never.
You're well aware of it, all right?
Yeah, I would like, to your point, I would much likely wait a couple of days for me to make sure I couldn't shake it off, but the kids I don't take a chance on.
At some point, it's my understanding that some of the employees were moved over that had been hired in the juvenile side were moved over to adult in a way to, trying to move people around to deal with the shortages we have. Is that
say that again, sir? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Some of the employees that were hired on in juvenile services were moved over to taking care of adults because of the shortages we were trying to.
You're talking about the medical contract or just in
no,
general?
just employees within the facility.
No, actually, it's almost the opposite. We've actually had to have some of the counselors and therapists from the adult side come over and assist the juvenile centers. because we've had a hard time hiring those types of people. The majority of the juvenile centers that had their staff and had their officers are still with them. Back before I even took over, I made the decision to have, if we needed help and needed overtime, say like at Vicki Douglas out in Eastern Panhandle, we staffed those with other juvenile centers that had good staffing. We didn't pull from, say, Eastern Regional Jail to come over and work at Vicki Douglas. It's just such a different kind of a situation that you're dealing with. And so, not that they couldn't do it because they're cross-trained, but it's a lot simpler. You got an officer who's used to dealing with a juvenile all day long. So they kind of took care of themselves, and then we let the other officers that deal with the adult inmates, we let them work the other facilities.
Okay, so the counseling end of it, if you got kids on the autism spectrum disorder, somewhere on that scale, you've got counselors that can deal with those more specialized.
Yeah, and those are mental health kids that we're trying really hard to find placement for. Those are kids that have been in DHHR custody, and because of their behavior, lashing out or whatever, they end up with us, but that's not really where they need to be. So we work with DHHR almost on a daily basis, every other day basis at least, to try to find those individuals placement so they can get the help they need. We're not, as the division, we're not really trained to deal with with the mental health kids. There are programs out there that do. It's just the issue of finding beds for them and finding the right program for them, somebody will take them. We don't really want to send them out of state. They're our kids, but sometimes we don't have any choice.
But you think you're making some progress in trying to work through that?
I do. There's a new cabinet secretary at DHHR. They're going through some transformations. The communications has improved. We got some people over there that's being very proactive on our end. They meet. They kind of established their own kind of a committee. They meet a couple times a week, and make sure that we don't leave these kids off the grid. They have their own flow chart, and we try to do the best we can for them to get them what they need. But our people do a wonderful job with them as far as treating them, making sure they're clean and fed. But we really don't have the ability to make sure they have what they need.
And you think you have enough staff to get them outside, get them out of the common areas, and get them outside into the yards? You're able to do that with what you got?
All the kids get outdoor rec, irregardless of the staffing situations. If we have to take them out 4, 5, or 6 at a time, everybody gets outdoor rec. If the weather's bad, indoor rec. They all get their meals and education, and they get everything that they're supposed to be getting. I made it very clear that these kids have to have what they're supposed to have. It's a huge part of their rehabilitation. I even went as far as I found out during COVID, there was a number of our jails that was using the gyms as storage because of the way things happened with COVID. And as of right now, all those gyms are cleared out and they're using them for rec. And that's a tool that can be used to rehabilitate an inmate, whether it's a juvenile or an adult. And so I know the importance of that. And so they would never go without having their rec and having their games and having their downtime and so forth.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate you helping me with some of my questions, and appreciate the effort you're making to get things, take care of these kids in this system.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
From Wetzel County, Senator Clements.
Mr. Marshall, thank you for being here on a Sunday evening. It's so nice. But
Yes, sir.
I want to transform back to our personnel issue. I drive by the St. Mary's Correctional facilities 2 or 3 times a week maybe, and a big sign out there says careers start here. If I decide I want to become a correctional officer, I see that sign. I go to inside. What happens from that point on?
Well, we've instructed all of our facilities to be extremely proactive. We'll sit down with you right there and get on the DOP website and get you an application filled out right then. We were finding that some of our facilities were struggling as far as pulling, registers and so forth. And there's a little bit of an issue when it comes to recognizing what job that you're looking for. They're coded and different things. It's a little bit confusing. So we've encouraged our facilities to reach out directly. We actually will call that individual and have them come in if they're having difficulty. We want to make it as easy for them as we can to try to get on the register and try to get them hired. There's been a number, sir, the last couple of weeks. I've said, call this individual, have them come in, and that's what they've been doing, being very proactive as far as trying to get them in, setting them in front of a computer and so forth. We don't want that to be an obstacle of not coming in and starting a career with us.
Well, what, are we having people apply and get to a certain point and then just,
Well, we found that we were, and I don't know that it was a problem. I don't know that it's obviously not the problem, but you have to take that civil service test on the website. And they'd get to that and they'd be like, I might come back and do it, or I'm just not going to do it, and that's where they stalled out. So now, until they took that test, it wouldn't come to us. So now they're coming to us first. We can reach out to them directly and say, hey, listen, that test's no big deal. This is what you can expect. As soon as you take that test, we'll be in contact with you to bring you in for an interview, physical fitness test, and so forth, and get you hired.
well, are we having a number of people that are not passing that civil service
No,
test?
that's not been an issue, sir, no.
It's just the fact that
Just intimidation. I think it's just intimidation, especially when you go on the site and, you want to work, let's say you want to work at St. Mary's as a corrections officer, and it doesn't give that designation, is where you want to, you get yourself on a register for a corrections officer. And might intimidate you. You're like, well, I don't want to be called to go to Martinsburg, And so we're making sure those individual facilities can reach out to them and contact them, say, hey, we'll work with you. We'll walk you through the process, and we'll get you in here.
now if I stop at St. Mary's and I get hired, I may end up at North Central Regional Jail? Or
Oh, no, we'll put you there. Yeah, we got vacancies everywhere, sir. We'll put you right there. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think maybe the thought process was you get on the website and you sign up to be a corrections officer, and it doesn't designate you necessarily for that facility that you're looking for. It might be a little bit intimidating. So, whether it be, St. Mary's, whether it be Northern, whether it be, the Lori Yeager Juvenile Center in Parkersburg, you want to go to that facility. We've got vacancies at each and every one of those facilities. We'll get you in there.
Well, do we have particular regional jails that are really suffering? You said that there were 8 of them with 40% vacancies?
Well, eight facilities in general. Yeah, not just the jails, but eight facilities in general. And I can give you those. Right now, we have Western Regional Jail, Potomac Highlands Regional Jail, Northern Regional Jail, Eastern Regional Jail, Huttonsville Correctional Center, the Vicki Douglas Juvenile Center, the Chick Buckby Juvenile Center, and the Mount Olive Correctional Center. So those 8 right now are right at 40 or above in staff vacancies, sir. So it's not just the jails.
I know there's been a lot of discussion about one of the problems with obtaining and keeping some of these people has been the pay issue, and I assume you've worked on that with the governor's office to try to get something on that. Do you have, and this is a hot question maybe, do you know what it's going to take to open that door up a little bit?
I don't. I just know that there needs to be some sort of a compromise, I guess. We need to land on something to show the officers and the existing officers even that we recognize them, and we're going to reward them with a higher salary, because our retention right now is just as big as our recruiting. We've hired roughly 150 since the first year, but we've probably lost that many, and so it's kind of a revolving door. But some sort of a compromise, and like I said, we would welcome a special session to address that, whether it be for the officers or whether it be for all of the correctional employees, would be welcomed.
You said that there were 300 National Guardsmen working in our facility.
I think the number's 334 or something like that,
Okay,
sir, to be
300
exact.
plus.
Mhm.
How much longer is that going to be able to be continued?
Well, we recently spoke to the general and the colonel there. I think I think the date for the current state of emergency is August the 14th. We've asked for that to be extended. I can't imagine that if we get some kind of a pay raise, it would take effect this next fiscal year. I can't see that we would hire 350, that quickly, between now and August. And what they're doing is they're able to keep us level, ground level. So we're going to need to extend them a little while longer.
Well, I assume that you all have to reimburse the National Guard for their expenses involved in this?
Yes, sir. And we had a conversation recently as well. If we can hire, 10 officers or whatever, and we can drop 10 National Guard off, then that'd be great. Because obviously our officers would be at a lesser pay rate. We've actually talked to a number of the National Guard guardsmen that have shown interest in working for us. So we've talked to them, recruiting some of them to want to come back and work for us full time. Not all of them have full-time gigs, and so that's been encouraging as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Douglas.
Recognizes the gentleman from the 76, Delegate Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here.
Yes, sir.
I've had the opportunity to go into North Central Regional Jail probably 3 times in the last 3 weeks representing clients in legal matters. And one thing I want to say is that the staff members, the officers there, and I've also seen each time I've been there somebody from the DNR, somebody from the National Guard, have all been very courteous. They seem like they're doing a great job under very hard circumstances, so I commend them for that. Right now, the Senator Clements asked about National Guard pay, and so would you say that we are spending more money with respect to having the National Guard in the facility than it would cost to have, even with a pay raise, correctional officers that we would hire?
Yes.
Okay. One thing, we've also had some questions about vacancy rates and the number of, and you talked about the number of inmates in different facilities. Would we be able to get a breakdown of that information by email, by facility?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely, sir. We do that. We update the population every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that'd be important. Actually, 3 things. One would be total inmate count. One would be the vacancy rates. The other one that I'd be interested to the extent that you have it, is the number of people who are incarcerated that are nonviolent offenders. I don't know if you have that information or not.
Yeah, I think that was provided earlier, but we can get that to you, yes.
Okay. So there's been a lot of discussion about, and in this past session, we had one bill that would have raised correctional salaries $10,000 over the course of 3 years. We had a bill that was more focused on locality pay and flexibility for the commissioner in areas where you are having more trouble in recruiting people. The other thing that has come up, or I've actually had correctional officers reach out about this, has there been any thought about a pay scale, kind of like the governmental scale, the military scale, or even with our teachers, where you have the number of years, you have, I think with teachers, usually it's the amount of education, but I guess it'd be like their rank in the military.
Yeah.
And something that would correspond almost like a graph that you could project in so many years, this is what your salary is going to be in 5 years. Because one concern I've heard from officers, especially those who have been there for a while, is that if you do bonuses, and you have a bonus where maybe your pay is not as high, then when people are coming in with a higher salary and then you have these bonuses that are, I think, within the salary schedule right now, maybe after 2 years or 3 years, they're going to actually get a higher pay increase, and they'll be a little bit, they won't be as equalized, I guess.
Right.
So could you speak to that?
Yeah, and I think that the type of pay scale that you're talking about, and from my previous background, the state police had an excellent pay chart. They went with 1 through 25 years and ranked from trooper to superintendent. And it was really, it was very elementarily laid out. I mean, if you had 5 years in and you was a corporal, this is what you made, and this is what everybody made. And so We are currently working with DOP. We're working through some of those issues to try to maybe wipe the slate clean when it comes to especially our non-uniformed employees. Mr. Douglas has done a really nice job. He's trying to address those needs to where, we've got corporal salaries bumping up to and over some of the sergeant salaries because of when they were hired and based upon the special hiring rates and, the money they received during a raise or whatever. So we are addressing that. To say that we could go back and start over, brand new, and end up with a pay chart like the state police has was probably a little bit optimistic. It would have been probably would have had to have been done from the beginning. But once again, somebody's going to get left out. Somebody's going to be caught in the middle there and left out anytime you change the structure. So, but yes, we are addressing those needs. We do understand the importance of that. I do understand the importance of being a sergeant on the floor, and I'm not making as much money as the corporal that I'm supervising. I recognize that, and we're working on that.
And the last thing, so I've heard recently, at least in newspaper reports, that Eastern Regional Jail has a vacancy rate of over 70%. Is that correct?
I don't know the exact number, but it's close to that if it's not.
Okay. So often we talk about the dangers for correctional officers and staff inside the facilities. But one concern that I've heard is if officers are going to Eastern, for example, and they're having to drive far away from their family, and they're also having to work sometimes 16-hour shifts, that, there's the possibility of car wrecks or other types of things that could hurt or kill people based on what they're having to do. I mean, is that something you guys are working on, for example, housing or other things to try to keep them safe?
Yeah, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to man those facilities. And when I say those are the vacancy rates, we don't, we still staff them with with the minimum of what we would need to get through a shift. And we try to bring those officers from the closest facilities that we can. And we also offer overnight stays. We're offering accommodations for them to stay. Actually, not mandating it, but you're saying, hey, if you work this many hours, you need to stay. We're providing that for them, and that includes the guard as well. And so, we're aware of that. We're working through some of those things. I mentioned earlier about the juvenile centers, helping the juvenile centers. We were having officers from the Robert Shell Juvenile Center in Barbersville going up to Potomac Highlands and working. And so now what we're doing is we're having them go maybe next door to Western, just right up the parking lot, help out for a little bit, and those Western officers going over there, helping jail type of thing, if they need to. But that's what's been happening most recently. But we do offer, a vehicle. We do offer accommodations so they're not on the road when they shouldn't be. Obviously working, back-to-back 16s or whatever. That would obviously not be ideal.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
A couple questions from the chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I want to go back to the National Guard for just a moment. We talked about the possibility of spending as much as $20 million on the National Guard this year. Would you agree that that's probably in the neighborhood of what the expense would be?
Yeah, I think the number was close to 17 million by the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
And so if we run into, August or September, I would say that'd be pretty close.
Would that include the DNR and all other officers working there as well?
We really don't have that many DNR. We do have a few, but that number would speak specifically for the National Guard.
So on January 30th, you'll recall that we passed a bill out of the House Jails and Prisons Committee that dealt with two things. First was a $10,000 across-the-board raise for uniformed officers, and then the second was dealing with the $6,000 incentive pay. I'm not going to call it a bonus because I'm told we're not allowed to call it a bonus. It's an incentive pay. Do you remember that?
I do, yes, sir.
Okay. Would that approach cost more or less than these 300 National Guard?
Well, I don't really know. I think it would cost a little bit more because of the number of officers that we have.
Okay.
And so I think the number and I don't remember exactly what I think the number was around 38 million or something for a raise.
That was for the raise. Did that include the bonus as well? Was that included in that projection?
I don't know the answer to that, sir.
Okay.
But I do, I do know to give all correctional employees a raise, it would have been more than that.
I've done a little bit of homework since we left the session in March, and I've talked to people who are counselors. And they are being called to work the floor. They've had the same training. So if we were to try to look at something that would include all DOCR folks, counselors, would we be looking at a considerable more amount, a considerable greater amount of money than we were talking about?
Well, I would have to do my own math, sir. To be honest
Okay.
with you, I don't want to give a number that I'm not sure of.
Sure.
But we have spoken of the importance of not only the officers, but all correctional employees
Yeah.
receiving some sort of a pay raise, pay bump. So,
Well, and I agree. I've gotten some feedback from some folks, and it's been very constructive.
we have a lot of individuals that aren't considered officers that have direct inmate contact.
Yes.
And so, and I'm sure you understand that,
I do.
obviously being, and I'm sure Mr. Garcia, visiting our facilities, understands that as well. And so, I feel like that's why the importance of that is there.
So I want your people to know that we hear them, and we're trying to do what we can to get something to happen for them that'll be a positive, and to
You know-
try to bring people in and try to keep people.
Yeah, our morale is pretty good. It's actually, like Mr. Garcia had mentioned, that when I go to the facilities, they're probably going to put on a little better face for me because I'm there, but I see a lot of really good things happening in our facilities at the staffing levels that we're at. And so there could only be greater things accomplished if we were able to get some more staff in there and get people in the right places.
Well, how many total employees do you have? I know we have total 1,022 vacancies, but do you have any idea how many we have working in DCR right now?
There's between 3,500 and 4,000, sir, and I don't know that I have that.
That's fine. I'm not going to try to pin you down on a number.
Yeah, I've got it.
But if
here.
you were fully staffed, which is something that would never happen, would it be around 3,500?
It would be 3,500 plus. 3,800. Okay, Mr. Douglas just advised 3,800.
3,800.
Yeah, 3,800. Thank you, Brad.
So if we were to try to address this en masse and try to deal with everybody, we would be talking about 3,800 employees.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You mentioned also that during the time since January, you maybe have hired 150, but you've lost 150. Is that somewhere in the neighborhood?
Well, I knew we'd hired, the last time I'd had it pulled was like 147, but we'd lost probably 60, 70, 80. Maybe not those exact ones, of course, but we have lost some. So it's been kind of a revolving door, and this is not an easy job, sir, as you know. I mean, it's a very
do.
difficult job, and one of the toughest jobs in state government, and takes a special individual to want to come in and face these challenges that we have every day.
Well, I can say that two things are unsustainable. Having the National Guard in there, that's unsustainable. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, sir.
And it's also unsustainable to expect that we could have our officers in this state working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, week in and week out. Would you agree that that's unsustainable?
I agree, sir, and, unless, if we were at full staff, unless they wanted to, but that's not the case.
Of course, yes. So moving forward, Mr. Commissioner, I want you to know that we've heard you. And this isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. This is a problem for all West Virginians, and we've got to try to fix it. It's something that we as a committee, as an interim committee, and then when we get back in here in session, we've got to try to address this issue. I'm hoping that we can see a special session that would deal with just this need. Because when I drove in today, the light was still on over the dome, which means we're still in a state of emergency. Commissioner, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you for the job that you're doing, and the staff that you have, everything that you're doing to make this a better place. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the kind words.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, Commissioner, I believe we've got one more question here from the senator from Wetzel.
Yes, sir.
I want to echo what the chairman said about thank you for the work you all have done. It's been pretty tough at times. If these pay raises come about, part of that price of the increase will come from the state, and part of it will have to be added to the fees that the counties pay.
Well, we do have general revenue and special revenue employees. Obviously, the jails are special revenue employees. So it would have to be funded both ways in order for that to happen.
So some of the burden of the increase, not I won't call it a burden, but the increase in wages is going to be borne part by the state and part by the counties.
Well, I don't think it would have to be, sir. I mean, if it was,
Well, would you get to us the number of ratios? I'm assuming that the corrections officers in the regional jails, that would have to fall under the counties, where the corrections officers in the prison side would fall under the state, except for those people that are in the county jails, after conviction.
yeah, I can get you that information, sir. Yeah.
Could you figure out how this would have to play out?
Yes, sir, I can, sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, sir, appreciate that.
Commissioner, I believe the gentleman from the 85th, Delegate Hott, has a question or two.
Accepting. Is in jails and prisons.
Yeah, I believe the date was late last fall, I believe, October, November, something like that possibly. But, when I accepted this position, this challenge, I wasn't really ever looking at, our future as, building on it with something we didn't have, so our people are doing amazing work out there, but I think, like Mr. Garcia said, you guys go visit our facilities, you'd be extremely impressed with the amount of work that we're doing. We still have our challenges, don't get me wrong. We're still working through several of those, but we're playing with the cards we're dealt, and our people are doing a great job, and they're pushing forward, getting the job done.
So it's important we recognize that the issues, as you've indicated, and as the chairman's commented on, it's not only with new hires, but it's also with retention. And it seems to me that everyone in this room agrees in a bipartisan way that the pay is a critical component to this issue that has to be dealt with at some point, recognizing that we cannot continue status quo and become accepting of our current staffing situations. And I would agree with Delegate Garcia. I've had the opportunity to do some touring of the jails and prisons, and want to say that you are doing so very much with so very little. It just amazes me over and over again how this is even being accomplished. So credit and kudos to those who are serving, and serving in a capacity that's just, I think, unreasonable at this point, that we would all agree. And want to say that one of the indications was that there is at least one facility out there that may be currently operating with a staffing shortage of almost 70%. Is that correct?
It would be close to it, yes, sir.
And 8 facilities in total, counting that one, that are at 40% or more.
Yes, sir.
Can just continue to applaud the efforts, and I would certainly hope at a very near time in the future that we will be called into a special session to deal with this issue, because as I understand it, the jails and prisons, the DCR, how you want to define that, is not an in-code employee. So unlike the state police, unlike our teachers and those staffing, that pay raise would and could come from the legislature.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner
Thank you, sir.
Marshall, for being here today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you again, Commissioner. If there are no further questions, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your all's time today. Thank you.
We have Senate Counsel. Mr. Fletcher is going to come and just explain the relating to per diem. I'm trying to get that word out. Thank you, Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. During the session, House Bill 3552 was passed, and it reached the finish line and was signed by the governor. It becomes effective June 9th. We've had questions about the bill since. There was significant changes made relatively late in the session related to the bill, and I wanted to just take a few moments that we have left and talk about that. So you have a packet there. You have the enrolled bill. Then you have on the back of that last page of the enrolled section, the enrolled bill, you have the abstract for the bill, and on the last of that there is a graph, which I'll talk about, and then there's some talking points that relate to the bill. So if you have questions about the bill, I've answered a lot of those questions in the talking points, and we have the graph, but I'm happy to walk through that with you briefly. The bill initially was a bill that allowed municipalities to have some sharing in the cost for incarcerations, and that is still preserved in the bill. At the final version of the bill says that if there's an agreement, the municipality can reimburse the county for 1 day of incarceration for an individual. Again, assuming that the incarceration is not for simply a municipal violation. That is in the very end of the bill. I believe that's subsection L in the bill. So that is at the very end of the bill. It applies, though, only to Class 1, Class 2, or larger Class 3 municipalities which have a population in excess of 4,000. And again, as you see there, if you look at that, in about line 113 and 114, it has to be done by a memorandum of understanding. Initially, that was 5 days, but in the final version, it reduced down to 1 day. Municipalities are subject to responsibility for incarceration for violations that are strictly municipal in nature. The larger part of the bill deals with the per diem jail formula. And the overall intent of the bill was to reduce incarcerations and then reduce, and by doing that, reduce the burden, the fiscal burden on counties. And the way that works, if you look at the formula, the graph pretty much shows it. So what it ends up doing is saying, so for up to 80% of a county's pro rata share of incarcerations. And the pro rata share is determined by looking at an average over the past 3 years of the number of incarcerations related to the state population. And that was 52%. That was applied pro rata across the county. So every county has its pro rata share of the total incarcerations. So as the incarcerations are up to 80%, there's a 20% discount. And you can see, using the current numbers right now, that would mean a county for incarcerations up to their 80% of their share is $43.58. If you'll recall, the current cap, or the cap that was in place, was $48.25. So a county gets a discount if they stay below 80% of their pro rata share. For incarcerations between 80 and 100%, they pay the full rate, $54.48 per night. You go above 100%, and you pay a 20% penalty, which equates to $65.38 per incarceration night. So the intent here, again, is to encourage counties to initiate programs, and many counties have such programs, to reduce incarcerations. We have a number of counties that routinely would be subject or are going to be subject to the 20% penalty. We have a number of counties that are below 80%. And we have some counties, the fewest number actually, are between 80 and 100% of that number. This all begins to take effect July 1 of this year. And the way, as I understand this is going to be billed, is as that for incarcerations per county, they're billed monthly. As you reach up to 80%, we all know, or the corrections will know the pro rata rate. They will bill you at $43.58 until you reach the 80% number. Then they will bill you at the $54.48, and then they will, if you go above 100%, it will bill you at $65.38. That's the gist of what that bill does, and so it could have two solutions, partial solutions to the. It will reduce the burden on counties, as I said earlier, and also if incarcerations are reduced, it reduces the overcrowding in the regional jails. Is this a total solution? It is not. It's not intended to be. It is a partial solution that the body was able to come up with and pass related to the per diem jail cost. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, counsel. Are there questions of counsel? Yes, the gentleman from Wetzel, Senator Clements.
Mr. Chairman, Carl, I'm looking, I'd printed off and was reading over this bill before I got your detailed one there. I want to go back and look at the bottom of you know, the page 5 on the bill where it talks about a memorandum of understanding. Would you go into that a little bit? What would be involved in that?
Well, I don't think there'd be any particular magic that relates to that, but memorandum of understanding would be some type of contractual arrangement or agreement that would be entered into between a county and municipality, in which a municipality would say, we will pay you, we will reimburse you for the cost of incarceration, and here it's limited to one night. So it doesn't have any particular form that it has to take or anything like that. And again, it would be limited to certain classes of cities. We don't have any Class 1 municipalities anymore currently in the state, so it'd be Class 2 and larger Class 3 municipalities.
Well, but when I look at the memorandum of understanding, that sounds to me like it's a negotiated item.
Absolutely.
Well,
yes.
what does the law say earlier on in there? It sort of laid out what had to be done, didn't it?
I don't, could you point me to a specific reference as to what that's relating to?
Maybe I misread what was there. Where it talks about the municipality had to pay for 1 day down here at the bottom where it's not a municipal crime or ordinance.
Correct. That would be subject to an agreement. Yeah, you could have an agreement to do that.
But it's,
And it's limited, I think it's limited here to 1 day.
yeah, but it's negotiated, apparently.
They have to agree to do that. And again, I did want to make the point that the county is still liable for the cost. The municipality would reimburse them. So the county still is to be charged for, and as it relates to the state or to corrections, the county is liable for that cost.
So the city would pay the county?
Correct.
Okay. All right, I've had some other questions. I'll
Okay.
get with you. We're in short here on time.
Yes, the chair recognizes Senator from Monroe, Senator Woodrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carl, this language doesn't prohibit a municipality and a county if they wanted to enter into an agreement for a longer period of time. It seems to be unclear, and that may,
And that may be where the senator from Wetzel was going with that, whether it was limited. The language does not specifically limit them from entering into some sort of reimbursement deal related to that, but it specifically adds the 1 day there. I don't know how to answer that, but it simply says, based on an agreement, they can do that, and it says 1 day.
well, if we, currently, I think we have 1 or 2 places in the state that have agreements in place that predate.
Well, they would not be affected by this agreement, by this provision or this bill.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counsel, just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what the reasoning was from taking it from up to 5 days to just 1 day?
I don't know, sir. I was not privy to that
Okay.
discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Further questions? Yes, yes.
Carl, my question is this kind of incentivize putting people out on the street? Is that?
No, it is not. That is not the intent. The intent is not to make fewer arrests or to, instruct.
If I could real quick, just because of time, sorry.
Yeah,
to interrupt.
yeah.
So I did drive around. We have Wood County, Parkersburg has a couple homeless liaisons. These guys go around and just check out the drug camps. And so if you're in Parkersburg, you see these guys just walking down the street and they're half crazy out of their head, obviously on drugs. Mm-hmm. And they want to put them in jail and keep them there, but they can't for whatever reason. And I'm just curious if 3552 is going to incentivize them to release more people that need to be in jail.
Well, again, to the extent that anyone's incarcerated in Parkersburg, it would be, if it's on a municipal violation, it really doesn't apply to this, other than they obviously have to pay for, I think there's a limit on the number of days of incarceration for a municipal violation. That's not been affected by this bill. The intent was, and we had a working group last year. The chairman was actually the chair of that working group. And what we found is that a number of counties have innovative type programs, day report, other drug-related programs where they are minimizing their incarceration. Also, the prosecuting attorney is being very active in monitoring the incarceration so that people don't sit in jail for long periods of time. That's the intent. Now, could it be that some county says, well, we're not going to arrest as many people? That's always a possibility, but that's a possibility now.
So, because if I look at a county or municipality or whatever that's got too many people in there and they're being penalized for it, I'm thinking, well, they're doing a good job. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I'm thinking, they're doing a good job. We're going to penalize them for it. But okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, the gentleman from the 76th.
You, Mr. Chairman, just a couple quick questions. One, it seems like the penalty phase of that would occur towards the end of the fiscal year, correct? So because it starts on July 1st, 2023,
Yes.
it's going to apply that $43
Right.
amount all the way up until 80%.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Okay, so then you get maybe into February, March, then they're going to get to the regular rate that they would pay, that $54, and then probably closer to the end of the year is when you're looking at counties that are going to be paying more.
Correct.
Okay. And I guess to the Senator from Wood's question about, especially with respect to people that may be suffering from homelessness, I mean, this would encourage counties, magistrates, prosecutors' offices to try to look at mental health as an alternative, I would think, right?
I don't know what you mean by looking
Well, I
at
mean,
mental health as an
if
alternative.
somebody is having issues that may be, again, substance abuse or mental health issues, which oftentimes we house people in jails for those issues, this would actually encourage us to try to work a little bit harder to get them the appropriate resources.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? If there are no further questions, council, thank you. And I see that we do have a quorum, so I would look to the vice chair, the co-chair, for a motion. The organizational.
Mr. Chair, I move that the organizational motions be adopted.
You've heard the co-chair's motion. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Is there further business to bring before the committee today? Not, I'd look to the co-chair for a motion.
Adjourned.
All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.